We are here in Des Moines to share with Iowans our message that all life is precious. And we want to educate Iowans on the importance of protecting those who are unable to protect themselves. And one of those candidates that we know where he stands with great certainty is Congressman Steve King. He has not only voted pro-life, but he has led the battle to ban sex-selective abortions. I have had the privilege to know Steve King for a long time, and he is a man of conviction, he is a man of integrity, and he is a man who is unafraid to stand up for the rights of the unborn and the sanctity of life. We should not be afraid to stand up for somebody who stands up for the unborn.
That's right. Yes. We have the most extreme president ever in office that is so beholden to the abortion lobby. You know, Barack Obama, candidate, talked about how he wanted to find common ground on this issue. We knew the day that he was elected that he would show his true colors, and he did. The first day, by executive order, rescinding Mexico City policy, saying that our tax dollars would then go to third world countries for abortion, countries that don't even believe in abortion. That's what Barack Obama did on his first day in office. I'm not sure Americans know that Obamacare brought the largest expansion of abortion since Roe v. Wade. We need to defund Planned Parenthood, the abortion giant in this country. How many of you have seen Lila Rose's work, Live Action's work, showing Planned Parenthood workers all too willing to aid and abet sex trafficking? We went around the room. I'd never talked to Steve King, but when got to him, he said, you know, as I think about being in Congress, he said, you know, if we could just get this life issue right, I feel like everything else would fall into place. And I tell you, he touched my heart when he said that. And he's been one of my dearest friends ever since. And I said this morning in Sioux City, Iowa, when you look up the word courage in the dictionary, you'll see a picture of Steve King. I mean, he is the most courageous man. He's willing to take all the slings and arrows that come with the strong principle stand that he's had ever since he's been in Congress. And could there be a clearer contrast between two candidates? I mean, Christie Vilsack will be on Obama's extreme team if she's elected. She has no interest in common ground, just as President Obama has no interest in common ground on this issue. But we know that without a doubt, we can always count on Steve. You know, Washington is out of touch. Washington doesn't know that the majority of Americans are pro-life. This administration doesn't seem to know that the majority of women are pro-life.
We introduced the Illinois Born Alive Infants Protection Act. And this was a law that simply stated in 3 sentences, any baby who was born alive, no matter what gestational age, no matter what reason for being born, wanted or not, was to be protected in Illinois. And this is when I ran into Illinois State Senator Barack Obama. He sat on a committee before I testified in 2001, 2002, and 2003. And he argued with me in committee against the Illinois Born Alive Act. He was the only senator to speak against the Born Alive Act on the state Senate floor. And he said giving these premature babies who were born the same legal protections as full-term born babies, he said would somehow lead to the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And so he voted against the Born Alive bill 4 times. And he spoke against it twice on the Senate floor, the only senator to speak against it. And Planned Parenthood said later on that he was their go-to guy on the Born Alive Act and in fact on defeating all pro-life legislation in the Illinois State Senate. The very same bill that he voted against the 4th time, the Born Alive Act, was identically worded that year as the federal bill who passed unanimously in the U.S. Senate. Senator Hillary Clinton, Barbara Boxer, who was mentioned, Dick Durbin, Ted Kennedy, all voted for the Born Alive Act. because they knew that not to vote against it, to vote for it, would be to say they supported infanticide. But Barack Obama, their future colleague, voted against it. So it can be safely and assuredly said that Barack Obama is more extreme on the abortion issue than even all of his future U.S. Senate colleagues. And it can also be said that he is the most radical, pro-abortion president that the United States has ever seen.
Christie Vilsack, as the head of Iowa Initiative, has done a lion's share of work to make sure that our unborn Iowans never saw the light of day. On the other side of that, we have Congressman Steve King, who is another man who climbs up on the hill He climbs up on the hill every day, and he tells the truth. And he fights for lives that he may or may not ever see, and he speaks the truth. We can tell people, who among here was planned? I mean, has their parent ever told you that you were planned, that you were convenient, that you were intended? Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But whether you were wanted or unwanted, planned or unplanned, convenient or inconvenient, life has value and it's worth protecting, and Steve King will do that.
Christie Vilsack and Tom Vilsack are very closely connected to Planned Parenthood, and voting for Christie Vilsack is voting for the death of more babies in Iowa. Steve King has proven over and over again that he is a champion for life. He will stand and face the Goliath, so to speak, because I know that it can really feel like you are alone. So he is willing to do that. He has proven over and over again that he will, and he's someone that we can trust with the Iowa babies that are losing their lives every day. To not get this right, well, nothing else matters. If we can't get this one thing right.
Susan B. Anthony fought for our right to vote almost 100 years ago. And who would have guessed 100 years later we would still be fighting oppression? Those who would enslave us by making us think we'll be free if we commit murder on someone else. It's time, 100 years later, that we stand up and stand for the little ones in the womb and say no more. It must end, and it must end now. The vote that we make this 2012 could be every bit as monumental as the Susan B. Anthony vote and that amendment in 1920. We have every obligation and responsibility that we must stand with them and stand against those who would snuff out the lives of our fellow Americans because they're not convenient. If they'll do it to the unborn, they'll do it to us next. And we're seeing it in hints of legislation that was passed in March of 2010. And what has been turned into the war on women, well, women, it's going to be the war call of women.
Yes.
I am not wearing these smacking red high heels because they're comfy. CWA is part of a Get Out the Vote project, our She Votes project, and we are working to identify like-minded women and help you get your voice. One half of Christians and evangelicals will not vote unless we help them understand the importance. It is time that we make our voices heard. Majority of Americans are pro-life, and it's time that we volumize that. Susan B. Anthony fought for our right to vote almost 100 years ago. And who would have guessed 100 years later we would still be fighting oppression? Those who would enslave us by making us think we'll be free if we commit murder on someone else. It's time, 100 years later, that we stand up and stand for the little ones in the womb and say no more. It must end, and it must end now.